Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be a video about a few subjects. That's the sound of the dog I'm dog sitting, lapping water. Here's some footage of Dakota. I don't know what kind of dog she is. I just know she's quite old, but she's still very fast and she likes to catch songbirds, tweety birds, the little ones. She catches them and she carries them around in her mouth. I'm going to project my voice a little more than I usually do in these videos because the camera is a little farther away from me and the microphone on it is pretty terrible. If I could plug a microphone into this camera, I would. But recording the audio separately and then putting them together and editing is just more than I'm willing to do. So I'm just gonna talk a little loud. A little update on my reading. I only finished about 2 books in the second half of November, so I'm going to leave off talking about them until my December wrap up part 1. I'm in the middle of a bunch of books, and this weekend when I'm filming the 2nd and 3rd of December is a readathon created by Real Life Kaz Brecker for Disability Awareness Day, some kind of disability day. It's the Disability Day readathon, and it's just the 2 days over the weekend. So for that, I'm going to be reading Sick Kids in Love. There is also the Read Palestine Week readathon going on until the 5th. So I've got a bunch of short fiction and nonfiction for that that were freely available for the duration of the readathon. The actual topic of this video, correcting misconceptions about Israel and Palestine. I'm not sure what I'll actually title it, but there are 3 main things that I want to talk about that are like confusing to people or like have been heavily propagandized or that I have seen people have questions about. So those 3 things are: what does "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" mean, that slogan. Number 2 is who gets to decide who is a terrorist and what is the definition of a terrorist, and like why are some people called terrorists for doing the same things that other people who are not called terrorists do. And then we're going to talk about Israel as a theocratic ethno-state. What is a theocratic ethno-state? How do you make one? Why are all theocratic ethno-states bad? And why does Israel not get to be the exception to the rule that all theocratic ethno-states are bad? Because a lot of people think it should be the exception to that idea. So first, let's talk about From the River to the Sea. So From the River to the Sea was originally popularized in the 1960s as part of a wider call for Palestinian liberation, creating a democratic state, freeing Palestinians from oppression from Israeli as well as other Arab regimes such as Jordan and Egypt. In 1967, there was a war that involved a lot of powers in the Middle East surrounding Palestine, and some areas in the West Bank and Gaza that had not been under the control of the Israeli state, that belonged to Jordan and Egypt respectively, were taken by Israel. So before that, those areas were controlled by those other state powers, but not by indigenous Palestinians. So the river we're referencing is the Jordan and of course the Mediterranean Sea. The misconception or the misinformation, depending on who is the one saying it, that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is a genocidal statement that is calling for the killing of all Jewish people in the area between the river and the sea. By the way, this is for educational purposes. Sometimes they want you to say that in videos so that they know you're not doing it for some other purpose. This has the same logic as people who think that land back means an ethnic cleansing of white people in the US, which it doesn't. Dakota wants out again. By the way, if you don't know the difference between those 2 terms, which I didn't until October, ethnic cleansing is when people are forcibly removed from their homeland or just from their homes. People are often killed in the midst of ethnic cleansings, but the defining characteristic is not them being killed, it's them being removed. And of course, since it's ethnic cleansing, it is based on religion or ethnicity, whereas genocide is the killing of people as a way of getting rid of them, as a way of trying to get rid of an entire ethnic group or religious group. And they often go hand in hand, like one will be done in one area and one will be done in another, or you commit genocide in a smaller area that will then lead people to run away to another area, so they've been ethnically cleansed. They tend to go together, but they don't have to. What From the River to the Sea is actually saying is fairly similar to the land back movement in the US. It is saying that all of Palestine should be free from Israeli occupation. So the part that is very radical is that it rejects a two-state solution, which is something that has been proposed by various people at different times. Two-state solution means that there is a state for Palestinians and a state for Israelis. And the Israeli state would be a theocratic ethno-state, which we will talk more about later. From the River to the Sea says that it is all stolen land, so a two-state solution would be unjust. What would be just is a one-state solution that is not the Israeli state, that is not a theocratic ethno-state, that would be a free Palestine where people who are Muslim, Christian, Jewish, atheists, whoever, can all live together and have nobody be second-class citizens and have nobody be the preferred type of person to exist, and where everyone has freedom of movement, which is very much a thing that Palestinians do not have in occupied Palestine right now. So that's why it makes Israeli people and Zionists very angry, because it says that Israel as a state does not have the right to exist. We're going to circle back to that with the theocratic ethno-state bit. And it says that actually, no, it's not just. Even if you freed Gaza and the West Bank, it still wouldn't be enough. And since Israel doesn't want to give up even Gaza and the West Bank, they find From the River to the Sea to be very offensive. In order to accomplish that, the Jews would not all be kicked out of the country. They would simply cease to be Israeli citizens because Israel would no longer be a state. They would be Palestinian citizens, and the indigenous Palestinians would have the power of the state, and the Palestinians who are in the diaspora now, who were removed from their land, or whose parents or grandparents were removed from their land, would have the right of return, which is something that they do not have now. They cannot come back. People who have been forced into Gaza and the West Bank would also be able to return to their homes throughout the rest of Palestine. Similarly, land back in the US doesn't mean that all the white people are going to disappear. If the land is given back to the Palestinians, they will have power over the land, and they will no longer be able to be kicked off their land by Israelis. And if the government is no longer a theocratic ethno-state, everyone can have equality, which they currently do not have. So TLDR, From the River to the Sea, says that there can only be a just system if there is a one-state solution, not a two-state solution, and that all of Palestine belongs to indigenous Palestinians, not to colonizers. And it does not call for the ethnic cleansing or genocide of the colonizers. It simply calls for equality and return of stolen land. Now, the second thing is about terrorists and definitions of terrorists and who gets called that, and like why some people, some organizations believe that Hamas are terrorists and some organizations do not. Which organization does not, you ask? The UN. The UN does not recognize Hamas as a terrorist group. I'm going to read for you the United Nations General Assembly condemnation of terrorist acts. This is from 1994. It says, quote, criminal acts intended or calculated to provoke a state of terror in the general public, a group of persons, or particular persons for political purposes are in any circumstance unjustifiable, whatever the considerations of political, philosophical, ideological, racial, ethnic, religious, or any other nature that may be invoked to justify them, end quote. Now, by this definition, anyone who tries to terrorize anyone is bad. Now, criminal acts, you have to think about what exactly does that mean? Does it mean international crime? International war crimes? Does it mean international law? Does it mean a particular nation's laws? Not sure about that, but if you just go with acts intended or calculated to provoke a state of terror, I think you could say that a lot of people fall under this definition, fall under the umbrella of things that are unjustifiable, such as carpet bombing civilians, such as dropping flyers that say that if you stay in your home, you will be considered a terrorist, arresting people who like posts on social media that support Palestinians, shooting children in the street, dropping more tonnage of bombs on a 25-mile strip of land in a week than the US did on Afghanistan in a year. Setting up snipers outside a hospital so that anyone going in or out will be shot. Interesting. Then we have the United States of America's definition of terrorism. In Title 22, Chapter 38 of the U.S. Code, quote, premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational groups or clandestine agents, end quote. You'll notice that by this definition, the U.S. government can never be considered a terrorist group. Neither can the Israeli government, because it's a national group, not a subnational group. The rest of the definition is about premeditated, politically motivated violence against non-combatant targets. Kind of like the killing of over 5,000 children in Gaza. Just a little bit like that. Kind of like how Israeli soldiers have been shooting people in the West Bank, even though Hamas isn't there. So yes, if you want to know why some people and not others are declared by the U.S. to be terrorists, it would be because the U.S. Code was written in such a way that nations cannot be called terrorists. Let's talk about theocratic ethno-states. What is that? That the government is controlled by a single religion and a single ethnicity. Why are theocratic ethno-states bad? I'm sorry if the rocking is distracting for you, but it's a good stim for me. But the way that one is really accomplished is through the population being majority of a singular ethnicity and religion. And that way it's easier to consider yourself a democracy while having one ethnicity and religion in power. Here's a definition of an quote, is a type of political structure in which the state apparatus is controlled by a dominant ethnic group or groups to further its interests, power, dominance, or resources. Ethnocratic regimes in the modern era typically display a thin democratic facade covering a more profound ethnic structure, in which ethnicity, race, religion, language, etc., and not citizenship is the key to securing power and resources. Meaning that one group is always going to be more powerful and is going to be the oppressor, and the other groups are always going to be the oppressed. So laws are made based on the religion. Courts are stacked with people of a singular ethnicity, so that whenever someone who is not of that ethnicity comes to court against someone who is, the person who is in the dominant culture wins. So not only is bigotry built in, ethnic cleansing and genocide are also built in. Because if you're going to have a majority of a singular religion, in this case Judaism, and you are colonizers, so you didn't start out with a majority, you're going to have to forcibly move the indigenous peoples, and you're going to have to kill them off so that they are no longer the majority. Most places that were colonized, if not all, I haven't studied all of them, were also ethnically cleansed and genocide was committed. In the US, obviously, I'm sure you're familiar with, but also in a lot of places in Africa that were colonized by various European countries. If you want to know about, in the case of the Congo, there's a book called Leopold's Ghost that I'm going to be reading soon, that is about the genocide of the Congolese by, I believe, the Belgians. So when you are stealing land, as is necessary by the Israeli people because there were people living on the land they wanted, you have to ethnically cleanse and commit genocide. There is a really excellent video by Sim Kern, who is Jewish, about how no one should get a theocratic ethno-state, including Jewish people. If you want to know more about Jewish people who are anti-Zionist, Jewish Voice for Peace is a very large organization that is all about that. And yeah, it's pretty easy to find anti-Zionist Jewish people if you are in anti-Zionist circles. Anyway, they made this video that is quite succinct, so I'll link below. Partially about theocratic ethno-states being inherently oppressive, and it's partially about how Jewish people are not the exception to that, and do not have the right to a theocratic ethno-state because of what they have suffered. The Holocaust specifically was horrifying, and then there was a lot leading up to that of violence of the church, the Christian church, against Jewish people. But they bring up that there was another ethnic group that was oppressed for centuries, and that was the Romani people, who were also victims of the Holocaust. And yet, no one has set up a theocratic ethno-state for them. And then they go into the reasons that a theocratic ethno-state was supported by the US and the UK, and it's basically to have a foothold in the Middle East, where they have people who are beholden to them, and a way to use Zionism, Christian Zionism, as fuel for their Middle Eastern war machine. Because there are a lot of Christian Zionists, more in fact than there are Jews in the world, and a lot of them are rich white Americans. They really want to egg on the end of the world by bombing Palestine. So this kind of circles back to the two-state solution, because a two-state solution would still mean that there was a theocratic ethno-state there, and the Palestinians who are from the areas that Israel currently controls would be under that theocratic ethno-state, which would be oppressive to them, as well as all the ones who were ethnically cleansed cannot come back. And I think that's everything I needed to say. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get a ceasefire this December.